When I went to Queen Elizabeth's Hospital School in Bristol, we obviously had to take part in sports, and one of the sports we had to learn quickly was rugby. And this extract, I'm reading about my first experience of playing rugby. To be seen to be good at sport was a distinct advantage at QEH. Being good at sport was even more highly regarded than being brainy, certainly amongst us pupils. King of the sports by a mile at QEH was rugby. There was a certain amount of snobbery about this, since rugger was the sport of the public schools and the grammar schools, and QEH adhered to this custom. Making rugby the main sport was important in symbolising that a school was superior, and distanced it from all the other schools which they, inferior souls, attended. They, of course, practiced that other ball game, football. So rugby, great game though it undoubtedly is and was, became essentially a divisive agent in the context of Britain's educational system. Put another way, rugby was considered a game for those occupying a superior niche in society. You attended QEH. QEH was a superior school. Therefore, you learned and played the game which differentiated you from the rest. Simple. Rugby itself was just another factor in the game which this country really plays best of all: class. Therefore, every 11-year-old arriving at QEH was immediately deposited upon a rugby field to see how well or otherwise he could shape up to this very rough and fast-moving game, the outcome of which was nearly always the triumph of the biggest and the swiftest. The success of its rugby teams at QEH, it seems, has always been of paramount importance. It is a barometer of the school's achievement, status and success, just as much as, if not more so, than any other empirical measurement. At every old boys' annual reunion dinner, no part of the headmaster's report on the school's activities draws more of an approving and swelling hurrah from the assembled old boys, and even older old boys, than the news that the first 15 won most of its matches this season, including beating the grammar school, Bristol Grammar School, just up the road from QEH, and perceived always as the deadliest rival, and success over who, to every QEH boy, was and still is the gold standard of achievement. Having said all that, I never really got on with rugby. I was a natural ball player and became one of the very best exponents of yard football at QEH and later elsewhere. After QEH, I achieved a good measure of success playing soccer, becoming vice-captain of the soccer team at Teachers Training College, and later having 2 seasons as a semi-pro with Redditch Town in the West Midlands League, as it was known then. It was cricket which was to be my vehicle of success at QEH, more of which later. However, rugby was never to be my lady. Not that I got off to a very promising start. The very first occasion I participated in a games afternoon, as it was known at QEH, at our Eastfield Road playing field, was to virtually kill off most of my prospects and interest in the game for many subsequent years. The game to which I was assigned on that first occasion was being refereed by Fred Cook, the music master. By the time I made my late debut on the rugby field, most of the selection process of abilities had been decided. The best players in game 1, next best, game 2, next best, 3, and then the leftovers game. Now Fred was a referee in game 2, and since I had never previously even touched a rugby ball, let alone taken part in a proper game, it was a mystery why I was pitched in at such a relatively elevated level. The only thing I can think of is I must have looked the part, what with my brand new boots and socks, not to mention crisp new shirt straight from the shop window of Marsh's of White Ladies Road. Thus, clueless, I took up a position on the pitch and began trying to work out what would be required should the ball come anywhere near me, which I was fervently praying it would not. Damn. Sod's law. Within a few minutes, someone threw the ball at me. I caught it. Good start. Then, looking up and seeing a whole pack of ferocious-looking large boys crashing towards me, I did the one seemingly sensible thing. I lobbed the ball directly to them, turned around so as to be going the same direction as this on-rushing human juggernaut, and ran away as fast as terror itself. A sharp blast on the whistle brought everything to a halt. Then, dear old Fred Cook, a mild-mannered and decent chap, teacher of music, much happier with playing his Mussorgsky records to bored and Philistine little boys in the choir stalls at the end of the QEH dining room, this same Fred Cook uttered the words which determined my whole rugby-playing future at QEH, and indeed, at the time, possibly my entire future. Go and join the leftovers game, Dutton. You don't have a clue. Head bowed and chastened, not even a sweat stain on my shirt or a little mud on my shorts. In fact, still looking immaculate, I made my way towards, by QEH standards, the very pit of humiliation, the leftovers. Well, the leftovers game was in the care of the maths master, that QEH legend, Mr. W.A.G. Moore, Bill, but universally known as Wag. To be blunt, Wag didn't have a clue either about rugby, and was perfectly happy for the rejects in his charge to do more or less anything to pass the time away. I recall when I joined this little band of oddballs, Wag was involved in an animated discussion with two boys on the exact number of miles it was to the moon from the Earth. This was going on as all three of them wandered around in the centre of the pitch. My fellow players in that game were Domer Swan, a very large boy with an enormous dome-shaped head to enclose his very clever large brain. His pal, Granny Gilbert, who was always at Swan's side. Granny was born middle-aged, bespectacled, perfect for rugby, and always jabbering away about his physics homework or similar. Then there was a boy called Jackson, who only had one hand. We understood that his father had been a butcher, and his unfortunate son had sliced off his own hand in an accident with the bacon slicer some years before. Anyway, these were the days before prosthetics, and instead of a hand he had a large metal hook, the claw of which he could somehow open and close in order to grip things. Not perhaps the perfect accessory for a rugby game. Then there was Grump Prestides, again a very large boy, bursting through the largest shirt and shorts that marshes could provide. Grumpfer was a lovely lad, who just wanted to be left alone to collect his Bristol City Football Club programmes and do his Meccano. His pal was Susan Stallard, a somewhat effeminate boy who had suffered from a childhood ailment, polio I think, which had left him with a withered arm. Susan was a witty and engaging boy who loathed any form of exercise, but who was perfectly happy to wander around a rugby pitch discussing world affairs, even at such a young age. Bert Wiltshire was a 100% Bristol lad with a 100% Bristol accent, whose main claim to fame at QEH was that he had drilled a hole with a compass through his two front teeth, through which, cobra style, he could deliver with deadly accuracy a jet of spittle over a distance of several yards. You never knew when Bert would fire off a little stream which would fly through the air with considerable velocity. You just learned to steer clear of him, and of course always make sure that he sat at one of the front desks in every classroom. Amazingly, when he left QEH, old Bert made a fortune with his ice cream business in and around Bristol. He probably got his front teeth sorted out. He needed to. Several other players graced the leftovers each week. There was Coline, rhymes with toe-line, Thorn, whose speciality throughout a game was to make dozens of mud pies, which later became distributed for a general mud pie war amongst just about everyone, before Wag faintly blew the final whistle. This would have suited George Inky Wills, an indescribably scruffy and unwashed boarder, who, as his nickname suggests, had a mostly blue face and body, sometimes royal, sometimes navy, depending on which colour ink he was using at the time. There were others too, whose names I have forgotten, but all rejected and damaged individuals in one way or another. After all, they couldn't play rugby now, could they? True, somewhere in amongst the misfits there was an actual rugby ball, at which someone would occasionally take a swipe. This was just incidental and secondary to the fact that none of the leftovers were much interested in what they were supposed to be doing. As long as they were left alone to make their own amusement for an hour or so, then all was equal. It didn't take long for me to adopt my fellow leftovers' attitude to the great game, and thereafter rugby and I effectively parted. Strange in a way, with my brother being so brilliant at the game. It takes all sorts